Good morning. እንዴት አደራችሁ? And welcome to the third day of the 17th annual African Investigative Journalism Conference that is happening in 5 cities across the continent simultaneously. I have been extremely excited because one, we've had we've had a lineup of amazing events or topics discussed, and two, because the energy was impeccable, especially in the house. Everyone was engaged, and I could see that all of you have gotten something and had given a lot. And three, because personally, as a moderator, this is my first big event, doing a hybrid event alongside other co-hosts, moderators across the continent. So it has been an amazing journey for me. So thank you very much for being part of this exciting journey. So as I said, it is happening in 5 different cities: Addis Ababa, Ethiopia; Dakar, Senegal; Nairobi, Kenya; Johannesburg, South Africa; and Abuja, Nigeria. And the primary host is Wits Center for Journalism at the University of Witwatersrand, and they are located in Johannesburg, South Africa. And Wits Center for Journalism is a program or a center for working journalists. There are 3 co-hosts across the continent, and here in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, the co-hosts are FOYO IMS. FOYO works to strengthen and develop journalism and media around the world to ensure free, independent, and professional media and journalists. And IMS is a non-profit organization working to strengthen the capacity of media to reduce conflict, to strengthen democracy, and to facilitate dialogue. So this 3 days, we've been looking at agendas, asking questions, and put some comments, and also put our contacts on the official app of this event, HOVA, and really quite resourceful application. This is my first time getting to know and working on it, but I found it to be a very efficient application. So you can use that. Make sure that we still follow the COVID protocol. We have sanitizers on each days when you are sitting or when you are talking together. Make sure that you keep your physical distancing. I don't like the word social distancing because we took it literally and we were socially apart, but it's physical distancing. And also we have coffee break, lunch break. I'll tell you about that. There is one thing: when we do the plenary session, we realized sometimes it's more engaging and energizing to have the conversation here within the room. So we will change one of the plenary sessions in the morning to a local session. So what we want to do is, and I want you to think about it, if you are the right person, you can tell us right now, or we can do it later on. But if you have done an investigative reporting that is particularly challenging, we want to hear from you, because we want to know how you navigated around those challenges and made it happen. What tricks did you use? What tips would you give us? What did you do best to get those stories out and to pass through those challenges? So if you have a story of such sort, please let me know. For example, when Maya, Fasika, and who was the sir? And Brooke, they were telling us their personal stories. You know, when we were going out to do this story, we faced this challenge, and this is how we got over it. So if you have stories that we can take lessons from, let us know, because that will give us a time to reflect on, to learn from, and to actually take tips from. So 3 people, if because I want you to think about it. That's why I told you now. And one other thing, we will break earlier in the afternoon so that we'll have more time to exchange contacts and to network. So we will have a little bit of a reshuffle throughout the day. But now, without further ado, let me take you to the first local session, and that is about corruption and investigative journalism. So this is another hybrid session we're doing right now, because for this particular session, we have Abraham here with us, and we have Caroline in Nairobi. So we will have a Zoom link. We will see Caroline here, and Abraham will be on that Zoom link for others to watch, but also he will be here in the room with us. So let me introduce Abraham first. Abraham Mariita is a media specialist working at Internews network based in Nairobi, Kenya. And Abraham is a journalist who has worked in media and nonprofit organizations for over 14 years as a reporter, editor, manager, media trainer, and project director. Abraham currently works with Internews network as a media specialist, where he supports data journalism training, media visibility, and research. His previous assignment was Transparency International Kenya, where he served as a communication and civic engagement officer, coordinating an investigative journalism and mentorship project. Abraham Mariita is a graduate of the University of Kenya. So, ladies and gentlemen, help me in welcoming Abraham to his seat here on the podium. Thank you, Abraham. And our second panelist is Carolina Jemsby. She is an independent journalist based in Stockholm, Sweden. And Carolina is an independent journalist, mainly producing investigative documentaries for Swedish television. She was previously based in Johannesburg, working as a correspondent covering sub-Saharan Africa, and she is often working with international cooperations in her investigations, together with Kenyan journalists, and in cooperation with Transparency International in Kenya. Carolina investigated cash transfers meant to reach the poor population in the Turkana region, who's been severely hit by climate change. So she's already here. Hi, Carolina. Good.
Hi, everyone.
So
Hi, I
now
hope the
let's
connection is
start
okay.
journalism, corruption and investigative journalism. And the floor and the screen is yours, my colleagues. So, Carolina,
Yes,
you are going to start. So
yes, I'm going to start. Do you hear me
good.
properly? Is the connection okay?
Yes, it's perfect. Now we can hear
Okay, lovely. Then I'll go. I'll try to share with you my my presentation here, because what I want to is to tell you a little bit about this story that we did together. It was, as you said, Matti, about people affected by the climate change in the northern Kenya. They were promised to get cash transfer aid, development aid, which many of them didn't receive. And so that was the story. But let's start from the beginning. I just want to tell you a little bit. It was not me, myself only who did this. I worked in a team together with Niels Resare, who is also a freelance journalist, and we've done several investigations together, quite often focusing on development aid and money not reaching the supposed destination. And we are both a part of a Swedish journalist organization called Eye on Corruption, that is aiming to train and mentor journalists in let me see if I can get just in investigating corruption, and we often work and conduct investigations in different cross-border cooperations. And this particular story started with the source, as so often. We were approached in Sweden by a person telling us that Swedish money meant to go for cash transfers to the poor people in Kenya were actually being stolen by other persons. And with this tip, with this source, a very long process started. I mean, our task here was to see, is this true or false, that there is corruption in Swedish funded cash transfer project? And we started going through documentation regarding all Swedish funded cash transfers projects in Kenya in the autumn of 2017. So as you understand, this became a very long process. We realized that there was a lot of documentation only available in Kenya. For example, the Auditor General in Kenya, where people are telling us that he was investigating cash transfer projects and finding interesting things. And we quite early identified that to be able to pursue this story, we needed to do research in Kenya, and we would also need skilled Kenyan colleagues to cooperate with. So hence we realized the need for cross-border cooperation, and we managed to get a project together with FUYU for training and to collaborate with Kenyan journalists and Transparency International in Kenya. And this was spring 2018. This gave us an opportunity to conduct a research trip in November 2018, which is more than a year after the source approached us. And we were then also able to train and team up with Kenyan journalists through this FOIA project. And parallel to this, we continued research. And I just want to mention something brief before I give the word to Abraham, like how to finance cross-border cooperations, because I mean, this is such a trendy word, you know it, all of you. Everyone loves to hear about cross-border cooperations in investigating corruptions, but it's time-consuming, it's expensive. How do you get the money to do these stories? And for us, this cooperation between Eye on Corruption and FUYU meant that we could actually be given support through something called the Creative Force, which is part of the Swedish Institute that has a small part of the Swedish development aid money. And we had the aim of this project to both improve knowledge and building capacity on reporting on suspected corruption, but also to connect journalists in Sweden, ourselves, with leading journalists in Kenya to work on this topic together, and to strengthen and develop networks of investigative journalism. And I think if you are able to somehow pronounce and identify a project like this, there are many ways to actually get funding. And I also, just before I give the floor to Abraham, want to mention something called journalismfund.eu. We got in a later stage of this investigation, which was really, really important for us to be able to finalize the story, the investigation in the way that we did, which actually came out very good, was that we were given money through money trail grants, something which is now not available anymore, unfortunately, but there are other grants through Journalism Fund. So this is, I hope you see my web page now. This is their web page, journalismfund.eu. And so please, if you have an idea, check this out, because there are many different grants and opportunities here to actually get funding for your story. So Abraham, I will tell you more later on, but first now, Abraham.
Thank you, Carolina. Well, at Transparency International Kenya, at the time, we were already running an investigative journalism project, and we were working with local journalists in Kenya to help them report more on corruption issues, so that corruption can be highlighted, so that basically journalists can be able to highlight this issue so that society can take some action. When this opportunity came, it was the first opportunity that I ever worked on a cross-border kind of journalism collaboration. And the situation in Kenya, just like in many developing countries, is that investigative journalism is not being funded, properly. And some of that reason is because it's costly. Maybe the media houses lack the capacity. The journalists are not trained to be able to do this. Most uh, older generation journalists are leaving the newsrooms to work in corporations and all these other places. And the new generation don't have the capacity to be able to do this. And there are, of course, other issues in regards to media capture that come to play, where media is controlled by external forces, which will not allow intrusive investigative reporting to take place that will taint the image of those who pump in money into the media houses through advertising. And therefore, we thought it's really important to train journalists in investigative reporting, and not just end it there. How do we take it from there to ensure that these journalists will be able to use their new gained skills and knowledge to be able to do the investigative work? So the training involved mentorship as well. And the mentorship in this case, when we worked with Carolina and Niels, was to bring in two renowned international journalists to be able to mentor local journalists and collaborate in developing a story idea that would basically be able to, show the gap in terms of corruption that is taking place, and which involves, cross-border collaboration. So that is the idea that we want. And the process was very simple, basically, because we wanted it to something that the journalists themselves have passion for doing, and therefore we gave them space to basically suggest the story ideas that they wanted. And when the story idea of the Turkana case came in mind, it was the best thing that we could think of. Reason being, Turkana, I'm sure most of you might know about it. It's Esel County. It's a semi-arid area which is affected by drought in most time of the year, every year, basically, and therefore majorly relies on donor aid to be able to provide food and other basic needs for the people living there. It therefore means there's a lot of development aid that is pumped into that community each and every year, but we are not sure how well the intended beneficiary usually benefit from that. So the concept of looking into this aid and trying to know whether the beneficiaries were benefiting for this was a good idea that the journalists really wanted to investigate. So in Kenya, the government runs what we call the Hunger Safety Net program, and it's basically a cash transfer program that is aimed at sending money from the government directly to intended beneficiaries. These are individuals like, the individuals who are affected by hunger. The other programs, for example, there are those ones for the elderly. So the people who are above 70 years old will receive some cash program just to be able to sustain them over a period of time, as well as there's that that is meant for orphaned children or people living with vulnerabilities that receive that kind of cash transfers. It's an integrated process that government and development partners come in to set a pool of funding, where this funding now moves from that pool. It goes through commercial banks and to individuals, either those who have mobile phones or not, but they're able to collect the money at their local point. And therefore, the gap that we had was to find out whether these individuals were actually receiving this money that was being disbursed from the government. So that is how we wanted to investigate. And it happens that CEDA, the development organization, was one of the biggest funders of this program in Kenya, and the money is coming from Sweden, and therefore brought about the tie between the cross-border collaboration, because Carolina is from Sweden and Niels, and they'll want to know how their taxpayer money from Sweden is being utilized in Kenya. And that is what built the story idea and the investigation. So we did that training, a week training, and we had about a small number of journalists, about 10 journalists, and we had each one of them present a story idea that they wanted to, and then we had these two of journalists, Seth Emmanuel and Ikra Salah. Back then, Ikra was at African Censored, and Seth at People Daily, who will then pair up with Carolina and Niels to be able to do that story. And therefore, they will receive mentorship from the two to basically support them in learning how to do this work in basically understanding the processes of tracking the money, following the money, even cross-border and all these things, so that they can be able to highlight that story. I think it's best now that Carolina can come in to talk about how they track the money, some of the tools they use, the databases and all these things, before I share on the mentorship process and the importance of the training that we did.
Thank you, Abraham. Yes, I will try to continue where you stopped. Let me just go back to my presentation and share with you. So as Abraham said, we needed to identify a project. On our side, our research hadn't really showed us in what project this money that was meant or supposed to disappear actually did disappear. But the Kenyan journalists, Seth Emmanuel and Ikra Salah, that we worked together with and teamed up with, proposed that we would investigate the Hunger Safety Net project, as Abraham mentioned. And I thought it was a really interesting project. Every time I think, as an investigative journalist, when you see pictures like this, like happy children in an ad for a development project showing like how the money somehow is, you know, providing a better future, it somehow really makes you want to investigate, is this really the case? Are these children laughing and happy now instead of not having enough food to eat? And also these were the kinds of pictures that the HSNP are providing on the web page. A happy woman getting her cash transfer through an agent in a local store in a village. So what we started to do was to, of course, read the reports provided by the Hunger Safety Net program themselves, which is run by NDMA, which is the authority, the agency for drought management in Kenya. We also started reading evaluation reports on this project. So I think this is like the starting point. Read as much as you can get the official version of how this actually project is working. And then I think the next step that you have to do in a story like this, and that we realized, was to do a field trip, to go on the ground and see how is it actually happening. And I know here, this picture shows how Turkana is located, for those of you who are not so familiar with the Kenyan geography. You see it's South Sudan and so on. And Turkana itself, it's a vast area with many different constituencies in the actual region. But we were managed to do field trips there. This is Ikra reporting from Turkana. She and Niels did the first trip there. And before going on the field trip, and this is something I really want to push for, is don't just go and interview whoever that you come across. Try to be systematic. What you need to do before going there, because of course not everyone in Turkana is supposed to get this cash transfer. There is identified recipients, And what you as the investigative journalist have to do, identify the villages who have the most recipients, identify the families who should get the support, and of course ask them all the relevant questions and seek evidence for what they are telling you. Talk with other people. Is it true? Ask the neighbor. Is it true that this particular family didn't receive the money they were supposed to receive, or they were promised to receive, and so on? So be systematic. And then of course the next question is, how do you do to be able to be systematic? And there is this one tool, this one thing that I would just like to say I love so much. That's a database. Because of course there is a database with all the recipients. I mean, if you would ever do a similar project, try to identify what database this is. And who is the owner of the database? Who is the one agency or person or organization that can give you access to the database? And in our case, I did some systematically research on the web and through background interviews with people. And I was actually able to identify the right database, the single registry for social protection. I'll see if I can share with you that web page as well. On maybe here? No. Whatever. But that web page, let me see. Sorry, I'll just see if I can show you the right. It's always a little bit here. So let me see. Sorry about the confusion. Always when new share, and let's see here. Now I think you see my web page on the social protection agencies webpage, who are the ones having the actual single register system, the database that we needed to have access to. And this is a huge database, not only focusing, as you see, on Hunger Safety Net project, but also on cash transfers to orphans and vulnerable children, and on other different cash transfers and supports. So for us, obviously, this was crucial to get access to. And I worked for several months trying, both through meeting them when we were in Kenya, and also continuing to emailing, phoning them, being a really harassment, really, yeah, asking them over and over again. And eventually we actually were given this Excel file where you can see, I hope you see quite well, that you have the county name, you have the constituency name, the location name, the name of the sublocation, the village. We didn't get the names of the actual participants or recipients, but we did get the number of households, the number of members in the household, how old they were, their gender, and so on. And this was actually enough for us to be able to go to the village and on the ground, ask around to identify the family who was the recipient of this. So this was crucial, I would say, in our investigation, for us to be able to prove that this is a family that was supposed to receive this support and that didn't receive the support. And also for going several times, in total we went 3 times to Turkana in different setups, different people. And also by going several times, going to the same families, same villages, asking the same questions, looking to see how does it look now, how's the situation now, that also meant that we could really identify the situation. parallel to the field trips, we were continuing to work with different evaluation reports, project reports, so that we can compare what we saw on the ground with what was described in the documents, in the papers. We also did a lot of research on the money process, like on how the money was moving between different government agencies, into the bank, to the agent, and eventually to the actual recipients. We also got a lot of help from the Kenyan Auditor General, who published very useful reports on this matter. And in the end, we knew that there are many recipients of the Hunger Safety Net project's cash transfer that didn't receive the money. We could also say that this means severe consequences for these people, because they were expecting aid. They were expecting that next month I will get this amount of money, meaning I can take a loan now from my neighbor and I will be able to pay it back later, or I will then be able to invest in this or that. So actually their situation was getting worse from being promised money that later on wasn't delivered. What we didn't find out was where the lost money went. We identified a process of many different transactions. We could see many different opportunities to take money out of the system for different actors along the road. We could also identify some companies run by people who were controlling money, kind of like dodgy companies that we somehow suspected was part of money laundering, but nothing we could ever prove or publish. And yeah, this is the responsible agencies in Kenya were NDMA and Social Protection Agency, the two, I think they've already been mentioned, and both these agencies were receiving funding from Swedish SIDA, and both were criticized by the Auditor General. Millions were lost, and money was also lost at the bank, Equity Bank, which is notorious. It's under different corruption investigation, one big investigation in Tanzania, for example. And just before I give the word back to Abraham again, I'm trying to like go a little bit faster because we were a little bit late in the start. So I hope I'm not running too fast through this presentation. I just want to share with you a little bit other databases. If you are to investigate international aid, developing aid, and I mean for you are sitting on the ground already. For you, it's so much easier to actually go out there, to be able to do the field research, and it's also easy for you to actually access the documents, and that's what I'm going to show you now. Swedish SIDA has a big database called Open Aid, and I will see if I'm able to just demonstrate it to you very briefly. This is the web page, and you can, in the right upper corner, you choose what language it is. So now I've chosen English. So if you end up having the Swedish version, you are able to just change it into English. And what you do here is that you basically just type in, say that you want to see from all responsible agencies in Sweden, obviously, to say maybe Ethiopia in this case, since this is where we are or where you are, and say within, I don't know, agriculture. And you basically just press the button, show aid. You get a graph, like what kind of aid has been given to Ethiopia. There's some information about the development cooperation that Sweden has, and so on. And then if you scroll down, you actually get to see, I think, largest sector, agriculture sector. That the largest agency here is the Swedish Research Agency, and here you can press show activities, and that's where you want to go, because what you want to access is the documents, not just this nicely presented facts. So here we see there is this one project of $188,289 sustainable climate adaptation of smallholder coffee landscapes in Ethiopia. Show activity. And you get an activity ID, which is the project number. If you would later to be asking for more documents directly from SIDA, who has a really good press service, you can, that's the number that you should use. And here you get more information about it and full description. Yeah. And I would press this number and eventually you start getting files that you can download related to this project. So I would say this is really a very useful database. I will also show to you, because I mean, now I am really interested in obviously in seeing where the Swedish money goes, but there is also another international database working a bit the same, provided by, I think it's OECD that's behind this, and that is called dportal.org. I had actually loaded it, I had prepared for it, but now it's not really showing. Let's see if it's able to load. I'm at a hotel in a small town in Sweden where I'm going to, maybe here we are, where I'm going to film today. So I realize my internet isn't as good as I wish it was. So I'll just show you the screenshot meanwhile, since it doesn't go very quickly and our time is running out. So this is what it looks like, dportal.org. And I hope you were able to follow on how I did the search on the OpenAid database. In this database, you're supposed to get exactly the same documents as you would get, the Swedish documents that you would get on OpenAid, but you would also get from all other countries. So I would say that maybe this is an even better database for you to work on, depending on what you're looking for. And just as with the other, just as with OpenAid, now I'm not able to get into the portal, sorry about that. But you type in the recipient country, the sector, if there's an old project, the year range, and then you can also access evaluation reports, etc. So this is a database that I would really like to recommend. And if you want to do investigations into aid and to see what is officially reported, and then of course, go to the ground, talk to people and see what's the reality is like. And some more databases that I also just want to share with you that you probably all of you already aware of. But if you go on to OCCRP's webpage, occrp.org, they have gathered a lot of different databases from all over the world, which can be of particularly use if you want to investigate different businesses, companies involved in whatever activities that you may be looking into. So this can be just a very good, a very good base if you want to find more databases that can be of use for you when you are investigating corruption. And prepare yourself to read a lot of documents. There are no shortcuts when you investigate corruption. You have to read through a lot of documents and to be able to find those small little sentences, the small facts, the information that would actually take your investigation further. So this is not anything for you if you are lazy. Prepare to work a lot, but it's worth it and it's important work. And it's also complicated. This was the graphics in our story, showing now the text is on Swedish, but the big arrow shows like where the money was supposed to go from Sweden to Canaan, and how it went through, first went to WFP, World Food Program, who later supported NDMA, who then supported HSNP, who then went to Equity Bank, the agent, and this is the easy way of describing how the money was being transferred and so on. In reality, there were a lot more different recipients and senders along the way. So prepare also yourself to read a lot, to work a lot for a complicated story, but it is, as I said, a very, very important story. And I think it's our duty as journalists to do these kinds of investigations. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Carolina also forgot to mention that the investigation took almost a year to complete. So it was really a lot.
Sorry, it actually took, I think, 3 years.
2 years.
Three,
yeah.
Yeah.
With more follow-ups, like more visits to Kana, more engagements with government officials, even with our interaction with government to try and get some of this data. Talking about the issue of access to information was also something that was really subject of the investigation that were ongoing. So just to wrap it up, this is something that made this whole process work. All that Carolina has mentioned, but as I previously mentioned, the training had to be really important, that the journalists need to undertake a certain training just to understand what is investigative journalism, as well as understanding investigative journalism techniques, research tools. Data journalism, I think, is something that we cannot really separate from investigative journalism, because as you see, all the database that Carolina has presented require that the journalists be able to have some skills to access, refine data, analyze data, and also be able to visualize it in certain scenarios. Safety and security was also important, because you're also investigating sensitive information, and you're going to investigate big companies that are transferring huge amounts of money. And sometimes it's even individuals who are, the ones supposed to give out this money to the beneficiaries, and are not doing that, and are possibly pocketing that money. What is the potential safety situation that the journalist could have, especially a journalist that has moved from Nairobi and gone all the way to Turkana to be able to stay there for a few days, to be able to collect this information, do interviews with the local community, to be able to get the info. And of course, after the training, there was the importance of having an aftercare program, something that will lead the journalists to be able to practice the skills and knowledge that they had. So that is the mentorship process. Because when you had the academicians yesterday speak here, they mentioned something that is critical, that you do not just attain at one time to become an investigative journalist. It needs to be a process, moving from one step to the next. So just after the training doesn't necessarily mean that the journalist became automatically investigative journalist. Therefore, there was need to be able to have that mentorship process to support the continuous learning. And we then supported the entire thing by providing grants. And this is something that I think media development practitioners should be able to consider. If you want journalists to really be able to do this, then you need to accept the realities in our newsrooms. Like I mentioned when I was doing the introduction, that most of our newsrooms do not have the capacity to be able to fund investigative journalism. It's a very wrong process. And as you see in this particular engagement, we had funding from the Swedish Institute, as well as from the Journalism Fund, because it wasn't complete in the first instance. It's a resource tasking initiative. So therefore, the grant process is therefore important to be able to make the journalists now be able to do that story. Well, it is always very important to also consider the experience levels of the journalists in a collaborative cooperation, because you want to make sure that the journalists can be able to coordinate. So in this case, I think the training helped these journalists be at the level where Carolina and Niels are, and therefore make it easy for them to work together. It's therefore good to have the journalists be able to identify who they want to work with, rather than telling them that you need to work with this person. Let the journalists feel interested in the story, in the cooperation, so that it can be easy for them to basically engage with each other without needing any much intervention from any person. And this basically helps to have some kind of knowledge transfer. Well, the experience remains with the journalists that were working together with the international ones, and therefore they can be able to eventually work on their own stories if they feel so. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolina and Abraham. This has been actually a very eye-opening session because the last 2 days we've been talking about resources, finances, partnerships, and all these things that involve what we involve investigative journalism, and you give us that insight. So thank you so much. I have 2 questions before I open the floor. So the first question actually came on Hova, and that's Caroline, for Caroline. So Caroline Lunga has asked, do the grants come with conditions on what topics you should investigate? That's the question. And in relation to this, my question is, sometimes it doesn't feel safe to put out what we're about to investigate on when we apply. So what's the safest and the most secure way to pitch to you without going through, maybe we get the grant, maybe we don't, but putting ourselves out there was very dangerous topics? How do we reach you, or how do we make pitch of such sensitive topics? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take the first question first. Yes, usually the different grants are conditioned, and I would advise you to go, in this case, I mean, what I mentioned, the journalismfund.eu. There are others as well, of course. You can look at the internet and Google, but journalismfund.eu has several projects where some is like, it must, like the money we got, it was conditioned to be a cooperation between journalists from Europe and Africa, and to investigate corruption. We also had the condition that we had to have a promise from an editor. We had to have an editor who were committed to publish our story, otherwise we wouldn't receive any money. So I would advise you to go through and to look on the different conditions and try to see something that could suit your story. And sometimes I would say, be clever. I mean, if this is like, I mean, our investigation was mainly on money being lost in developing aid, but there was also a climate aspect of the story, since this was an area and a population severely affected by climate change, which meant that we were finalists in a big award for reporting on climate covering now, an international story, and that, I mean, those kinds of aspects in a story could also, I think, enable you to more different grants. Right now, very many organizations around the world wants to throw in money into climate journalism. So try to find a climate angle would be my advice. For the second question, can you just, so that I get it right, that it's sometimes like how to report on sensitive issues or potentially dangerous issues? Was that the question, just so that I get it right?
Not to report, but to pitch. Because, for example, the aid story, probably it involved some high-level government officials. So to come forward with that kind of sensitive information through the web, through the network, we may not feel safe. So what's the safest way to pitch to you this kind of sensitive issues? Or is there any other advice that you
Yeah, I think to do justice what you are saying now, to think before you pitch. And I would never publish or write an accusation on corruption being connected to high-level officials if I didn't have a lot of evidence for it. And then I would probably not put it in the pitch, but in the final story, if that was the case, if you would have proof or reason to suspect that high levels were involved in the corruption story. Be careful, think about safety, think about who is going to read this pitch when you're applying for money. What can I tell? What can I not tell? There's always a risk of someone stealing your idea, obviously. It doesn't happen often, but I mean, don't give out too much information, both for safety reasons, but also for not making it too easy for someone else to do your story. So be a bit restrictive, and I would say always think about security, because if you're gonna be threatened or attacked in some way, meaning you can't do your job, that's the worst outcome in a journalistic matter. So think about safety. What can you say? What can you not say? And so on. Yeah. I hope that was an answer.
Yes. Thank you so much. Abraham, do you want to add on one of these questions?
Yeah. So it's very practical the way we did it, and what we have always done with journalists. So we have created a platform where the journalists could basically upload their pitch and ensure that that platform is secure. So it's just like a website where they'll need to register, then putting their story idea and their work plan and the budget. And then this is only accessible to a few program staff who are able to review it, and amongst themselves, then they can decide then who are we going to support. That would be one of the safest ways. But of course, just as Karina said, it is you yourself to analyze the situation to decide whether or not you want to share this. And a lot of these organizations that provide funding for grants like Internews and the rest will always have an opportunity for you to have conversations with them in case you consider that whatever you want to pitch is really sensitive, and they can create an opportunity for you to provide it in a most secure way through proton emails and all these things, so that you can feel that this is only a conversation between you and them, and then you can be able to investigate it freely.
Awesome. That's very comforting to hear that you did all you can to keep it really safe and secure. Any question from the house? Okay, so let's keep our questions. Oh, hold on. Let's see. So we're about to start the live session, right? Yeah, because it's 11 o'clock and the live session is happening very soon, but I'll make sure that Abraham here will answer all your questions later, maybe after, during one of our local sessions, we'll give it time for Abraham to come back on the podium and to answer more questions, because this is quite important. But Caroline and Abraham, thank you so much. I hope you're having a good time away from us, Caroline.
Oh, I so much wish I would have been there with you. I mean, the end of an investigation. I'm actually going out filming today, so I can't, but I really would have wanted to join you in Addis.
Yeah, well, I feel you, and we wish you were here, but next time you're here, coffee is on me. I promise.
Absolutely.
All
Next time I'll be there.
Caroline. Okay, thank you so much, Abraham. Please let's send him back to his seat with warm applause. But later on, because we will have time, I will bring him back so he can answer you all your questions, and to have some more time for discussion. So who are the three people who are going to be telling us about their stories on investigative reporting, their challenge, and how they overcame their challenge? Anyone? For later on? Or do you want to keep it a surprise and tell me after the session? I love surprises. I can take surprises at any time. Okay, so think about your stories, the investigative reporting you have done, the challenge you have faced, and how you overcame those challenges, so that we can learn from your practical experience. So think about that. Now we will go back for the plenary session, and this time it's gonna be managing investigative journalism, and I think it's about to start.